Colleague is coming. Colleagues, I think I'll call this meeting to order. This is the 26th meeting of the Government Operations and Estimates Committee dealing with the Canada Post study. Before we get into the meeting proper, colleagues, just a bit of committee business, if I could have your attention. I've spoken with some of you individually, and this is concerning the upcoming cross-Canada tour to study the Canadians' opinion of and expectations of Canada Post. We have a meeting tomorrow afternoon starting at 3:30. If you are available, I have asked the logistician who has been putting all of the details of this tour together to come and meet with us at 3 p.m. tomorrow in this meeting room just prior to the start of our 3:30 meeting. The itinerary for the tour, which starts on Sunday, at least flights are starting on Sunday, that complete itinerary will be sent out to all of you electronically tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning. So you'll have an opportunity to take a look at the itinerary, but the purpose of the 3 p.m. meeting is to answer any specific questions you may have. Ground transportation. If I arrive at an airport at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, will someone be there to meet me, or do I take my own transportation to the hotel? Where are the hotels, et cetera, et cetera? How will the meetings be conducted? All of those questions you will have an opportunity to pose tomorrow at 3 p.m. So if you are available, we'll send out a notice of that as well, but 3 p.m. in this room to talk about the logistics behind the cross-Canada tour. Now, with that, I think we'll commence the meeting. As you know, colleagues, we are engaged in a study on the future of Canada Post. The minister responsible, the Honourable Judy Foote, wanted to have extensive consultations. As part of those consultations, she had a task force established. Those members are with us today to discuss the findings of their report. Their report has some specificity to it about the viability, the financial viability of Canada Post as a corporation moving forward. Of course, we will be going out talking to Canadians about their expectations for the future of Canada Post. Following that, this committee then will be engaging in writing a report based on both the findings of the task force and what we have heard talking to Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and that report will ultimately be tabled in the House of Commons prior to the end of this year. And from there, the government will make its decision in due course. So now we are here to listen to the task force. Madame Bertrand, I understand that you have a 10-minute or so opening statement, but before that, perhaps you could introduce your task force colleagues and then commence with your statement. Following that, we'll get into questions and answers from committee members. Madame Bertrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's our pleasure to be here in front of you today after 4 months of intensive work, and I'd like to introduce to you the three other members. First, I'll start with the right, Christine Hogg, who's from Toronto, sometimes in St. Andrews, where she has a house as well. So she says she's somewhat bipolar. Here on my right is Marina McLaughlin. She's from New Brunswick, and she was a public servant for many, many years. On my left, if you love football, you know him. It's Jim Hopson from Saskatchewan. So those are the four larrons, we say in French, all from different backgrounds and experiences. And here behind us are some of the members of the department who help us with the work, and I want to salute them because really it's an effort of many people. And you'll allow me to kind of remind you, which you know exactly, given that you'll be on the road very soon with our work. We had to assess the financial situation of Canada Post as of today, not an audit, but as of today, and projection. We had to assess needs of Canadians, and we've opened a website. We received lots of letters. 22,000 Canadians gave us their opinions, but we also did scientific polling. We did more than 1,200 Canadians to kind of understand what their needs, but also how they behave, because sometimes you'll see there's some difference there. And we polled also some businesses. We thought businesses have oftentimes different needs than the personal usage we may have. And once we assess the financial situation and we know the needs, we ought to see is there a difference, and do we have ideas to bridge the gaps? And for that, we worked with a firm that had the international experience in order to bring to us the best practices in postal services around the world. The financial assessment itself was done with EY, and the poll were done with, remind me, ECOS, Patterson, and Langlois.
And Veronix.
And Varnix, thank you. Those studies all contributed to the understanding of the situation that we'd like to share with you today. So let me start by saying, for us, over the last 5 years, letter mail volumes have declined by 20% and now makes up less than half, c'est-à-dire 42% of Canada Post mail volume. Over half of the mail now delivered is ad mail, not only flyers, but also address mail. On the other hand, e-commerce has driven parcel volume increases. So we may say Canada Post went from being a mail-centric business to a parcel-centric business. Unfortunately, letter mail volumes are expected to continue to drop, and I say unfortunately because it is where the majority of the revenues come from. And the future of ad mail itself is questionable given recipient preferences and greening initiatives, and the parcels market is highly competitive and becoming even more so, which means that when you're in the parcel business, you have to go by the market reality, and you cannot come and say, I'd like an increase. You can ask for the increase, but of course, you're not in a monopoly situation as you are with the mail. A major challenge faced by Canada Post is that its costs are largely fixed. These costs are difficult for the corporation to reduce in reaction to declining business volumes. Canada Post has a vast infrastructure of processing plants, depot, and post offices for processing the mail. Postal services are highly labor-intensive, and as such, labor costs represent about 70% of Canada Post's total costs. Canada Post also has a pension plan with a current estimated solvency deficit of $8.1 billion as a result of temporary relief granted by the government. Canada Post was able to defer payments of about $1.4 billion in 2015. Unless the interest rate environment improves substantially, which we all wish for, Canada Post will not have sufficient cash on hand to finance its operation when it resumes making its solvency payments. Canada Post is also contending with other challenges stemming from the obligations outlined in the Canadian Postal Service Charter, which includes the requirement for mail to be delivered 5 days a week. This is at odds with the views of surveyed Canadians, where 73% of Canadians were open to the idea of alternate day delivery. The Charter also maintained the 1994 rural moratorium under which Canada Post is prevented from closing or franchising almost 3,600 corporate post offices. As a result of population growth, some areas that were previously rural are now suburbs of major cities. And I'll just give as an example, Halifax, Moncton, Saskatoon, those are now cities. We all know this. So what we have done once we kind of did the facts finding around the situation, we found out that Canada Post, even today, which has for the last year a small profit of $99 million. For us, it's a small profit, not for our own portfolio, but for the portfolio of Canada Post. And when you do the projection, you say in 10 years from now, it will be at loss of $700 million. So we felt that we ought to be really looking, as was asked by the minister, what could be done in order to help Canada Post to remain what Canadians have told us. The majority of Canadians have told us, and I mean over 80, somewhat and 90% have told us, Canada Post, I like their service, I'm attached to it, I want it to remain a public service, but the reality, I don't use it as much as I did. 91% of Canadians are connected to internet. 69% of Canadians do pay their bills and receive their bills through internet. So, of course, there is the reason why you don't see as much usage of mail as we used to. So what we have done with Oliver Wyman was to look at different options that could bring either savings or either new revenues. And we've filtered the possibilities that we scan into the different postal services in the world with 3 criteria. The first one was, is there a fit with the abilities and the competencies that do exist in Canada Post? The second one was, is there some space in the market? And thirdly, do they have the means? I mean, is there a lot of investment to be done, given that financially it is a kind of a very narrow possibilities? Is it possible to do it without going with a huge investment? After having scanned more than 30, it was 38 actually, we eventually choose, given those criteria, to present to you for your consideration 8 possibilities that are mostly savings. One that you'll recognize will be the community mailbox conversion. But given what we had heard from Canadians, we thought it'd be important. In the stakeholders meeting we had, we were told downtown cities where there's a lot of traffic, little space, we should consider not to install community mailbox downtown. And the majority of Canadians, I'd say more than 90%, told us people with mobility problems should get their mail door to door. But if you exclude all those, it's about 800,000 addresses. Canadians were prepared to go with community mailbox when understanding the financial situation. The other one was converting about 800 of the highest volume corporate post offices, like I was alluding to, Halifax, Moncton, Saskatoon. Those are examples all across the country of rural realities in the 90s that have become either suburbs or urban areas. The other thing that is very interesting to point out to you to be considered is an alternate day delivery. Right now, you understand that parcels are being brought to the home by the same people who bring the mail, where the Canadians have told us that it's important for them to have maybe the parcel the same day, but for mail, once, twice, 3 times at the most at the week. And when it's in the community mailbox, they told us oftentimes they go only once a week to pick up their mail because the reduction of volume. The other possibilities we are offering to your consideration is streamlining of processing operations. Of course, like any business, we can always streamline, and we figured that those could be estimated at 66 million. You all know that Purolator belongs to Canada Post. There's already some synergies that have been worked between Purolator and Canada Post. We think more can be done, and we say it could get a 16 million saving there. And then we have a few ideas on more revenues, but they're not huge amount. Advertising to be sold on post offices and on the fleet. It's a large fleet, so it could be interesting. We said between 15 and 20 millions. We've put 19 millions. And the last mile, the obligation to Canada Post to reach out to all Canadians wherever they are on the territory, well, that is a revenue of about 10 million if they were able to find other partners for which they could do the delivery. So those are the ones that you can kind of identify as budgetary type of options we're presenting to you. But looking at the situation and how serious it was, and the fact that we're in the digital world and it will move on, the oversampling we've done with the young people, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Drouin, we felt from what we had discovered that not only is it going internet, it's going mobile. And it will be, the speed will be even faster as we go. So there is a necessity to understand we're at crossroads, and that some measures can be taken to adjust the budget in the short and midterm, but there will be a need to look into the long term, and the long term will require more type of structural options, and we've put some for your consideration, and they are, from our point of view, around using the post office that could remain after a review of what is really rural to offer that service to municipalities, to provincial government, to other services in the federal government, even to private sector, like banking. We know that banks have kind of left some communities. Would they be interested in partnering with Canada Post to offer service in those areas? The other solution that seemed to be interesting for your consideration would be a change of governance. Is there some interest in changing the rapport to make sure that it's such a complex institution to have all the stakeholders around the changes that will need to occur? Also, we all know that the relationship with the unions is not an easy one. We were observer to the situation lately, and we felt that we should propose to you that you should consider the idea of a third party to come to the table with the stakeholders, not an arbitrator or a mediator, but somebody to work a restructuring of the operations to make sure it responds to what has become Canada Post. There's also always the situation of adjusting the price of the stamp. That has been used in 2014. In 2014, there was a step from 63 cents to 85 cents. It cannot be said that this was the reason why there's a decline, but it could be expected that the more you raise the price of the stamp, if you do over what the indexation is, you might be in a situation where you accelerate the stamp. But certainly, there is no view in the analysis we've done with Ernst & Young that the price of stamp should be frozen. So there again for you to consider. And finally, you've seen the headlines of the different media in the country. They've picked up on our idea of marijuana, and they really misunderstood, did not really read the full report. What we meant there is marijuana is already medically distributed by Canada Post. If ever, the government should see in their wisdom to do something about legalizing marijuana, maybe they should consider a part for Canada Post. We didn't talk about production, retailing, we talked about the distribution arm. Did I forget something, my friends? No? Okay. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Madame Bertrand, for a very comprehensive opening statement. I thank you for that. Colleagues, I should probably say in the spirit of transparency, as Madame Bertrand has said, Mr. Hobson is well known in football circles. I certainly consider myself a friend of Mr. Hobson. He's the former CEO and president of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And while I don't need to recuse myself just because I have a personal relationship, I thought it might be good for this committee to, in the spirit of consensus building, so we can all pull together in the same direction, just to come to consensus that we all agree the Saskatchewan Roughriders are the greatest team
Point
in
of
the
order,
CFL.
Mr. Speaker. Point of order.
If we can start with that premise, then I think we'll have a good meeting.
I challenge the chair.
Anyway, all kidding aside, thank you again, Madame Bertrand. We will go into our normal round of questioning. We have scheduled this meeting until 7:30 p.m., so we've got approximately, I think, about an hour and 3/4 of questions. We will start with a 7-minute round of questions, starting on the government side. And Monsieur Drouin is the first intervener, please, for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the task force for spending their summer on the road and meeting Canadians and writing this report. We certainly appreciate it. So over the past 4 months, you've been tasked by the minister to go seek input from all kinds of Canadians, all kinds of stakeholders. And what was? Can you explain to the committee the exact mandate of the task force?
Oops, absolutely. The exact mandate was to assess the financial situation, not to do an audit, but to look into the situation, and to assess the projection we could have for the next 10 years. The second thing was the needs of Canadians. We had to not consult Canadians, we had to engage Canadians. So what we did, we established a website by which we had one question every week to kind of create the traffic on the website. We also kind of said that any letter we would, of course, treat. And the other thing we did was to do polls. We did polls with Canadians. 2,400 Canadians were polled, plus 400 natives, plus 1,200 businesses. So those are scientific data we're bringing to your consideration and the help in your work. And the third thing was, in order to, we work with the experts, EY and Oliver Wyman, but we thought to meet stakeholders, either clients, competitors, association, unions. We met with the unions, of course. Canada Post was met a few times because they were providing us with the basic data that enable us to do our work. So that was what we've done, and we would love to travel the country, but we stayed in Ottawa most of the time because we understood very well that you were the ones to consult Canadians in the sense of traveling the country. We had to really pull and open the line so that people were aware that there was that work that was being done, us being the part one and you being really the part two.
And I understand, this committee is about to get underway across Canada. I come from rural Canada, and one of the, sometimes the only institution in that community is Canada Post and the flag, and it's sort of a sense of pride for Canadians. And one of the things that from your report that I saw was sort of the bit on postal banking. Yeah. And I received a letter from Eastern Ontario mayors asking me to advocate for postal banking. And I agree that Canadian banks are on a solid financial footing. They're doing great at their job, and I know that, as you said, I'm a young Canadian. I'm only 32 years old, and I rarely step foot in a bank. But I also have to think about my grandmother, and the grandmothers out there who are still, just my father, who can't even, he still calls me to put a DVD in there. But I have to think about them as well. And they're still dependent on walking into a physical place. And can you explain to me the rationale for falling onto number 4, which was partnering with 3 to 5 large banks or credit unions to provide a low-cost extensions to the branch network? How did you come to? What was the rationale behind coming to this specific?
Let's go back to the premises, the fact that postal banking, if we were to start a bank, we have met lots of stakeholders. We have met also on the phone. We didn't travel with La Poste in France, with UK, with other to understand. And we understood the complexity of establishing a bank today. In the fact that the investment to be done because of regulatory conformity, because of the necessity of very sophisticated IT security, and the competencies needed are very costly. Where we have a situation here, and I'll forget because you've read that Canadians are well served, that you understand very well. Well, the cost of establishing a bank is very expensive. It may be your choice, not for us to decide what the government will do at the end, but for us, given that our mandate was to balance the fact that it is not self-sustainable as we speak, to go into postal banking would not help the self-sustainability. But now government may decide something else. What we ought to be kind of describing was that. The second thing is, we recognize that the postal office in rural and remote has a different character than the one in the city. Not only because it's got the flag, but because it's still kind of a witness of
It's the only point of rendezvous for many Canadians.
Yeah, it's a hub. That's why we call it a hub. And we say it keeps the vibrant community. And that's why we propose here to you that it would be interesting if the post office becomes more than just the post office. Not only do I meet there, but it could be a cafe. The municipality could have some services there, other businesses, maybe the provincial government. We said the Service Government Service Canada, plus the banks. They could bring one counter of their bank, because in most of those communities, they've retracted. They're not there anymore. So we felt that the hub could serve well your grandmother and maybe yourself, because one day you'll want to go and meet somebody face to face.
I think I'll stop there. You're about 10 seconds before the deadline. Monsieur Blaney, 7 minutes, please.
Est-ce qu'on parle du système de compensation?
Are we talking about Phoenix or are we talking about Canada Post, Mr. Chair? Madam President and members of the panel, congratulations. Bravo. You have done remarkable work. I think that you have a constructive approach. You have an exhaustive approach. You looked at all the factors. You consulted experts, you dug in deep, and you have a realistic approach. And I hope that on our tour we will meet lots of people who will say that there's a lot of icing on the cake, but we have a problem because the cake doesn't have much yeast in it. And I really liked it when you said that the opinion poll said that once Canadians were informed of some of the financial details of Canada Post, more easily accepted the changes. And there were discussions here, even with our analysts, on how we could raise the awareness of Canadians about the dramatic situation that is underway at this service to which we are all attached. I come from a region where I have a lot of rural area, and I see regions where there is a rural postal service and community post boxes, and some service will remain in some parts of my area, of my riding, and not in others. And so I think that there's a principle of fairness that needs to be applied. And you talked about mobility earlier. You said probably in the case of people who have reduced mobility, we should maintain home delivery. But in my riding, people who have mobility problems don't have their home delivery. So I think that we should find solutions that apply to all Canadians. Otherwise, and this is my question, won't we pit the regions against the cities and they'll say, well, I'm in a region and I have to pay to maintain this service in the cities. I'm speaking a lot. I have another of questions, but that's my first question. The other question, could you please touch on governance? It's very interesting and it's vague at the same time. And obviously, I don't want to preach to the choir, but what about a moratorium? The service is inferior. Shouldn't we dare to go farther in these scenarios, because the government will perhaps not accept everything that you have proposed, but if we go farther, the government may adopt other measures. I've spoken a lot, but thank you, and I'd like those questions answered, please.
Question, as the question was posed, will be right at the 7 minutes, so please.
See, you have plenty of time.
Non, merci des commentaires positifs.
Thank you for the positive comments that you made. I think it expresses the importance that we've given to your committee, and we're happy to bring you as much information as possible so that you can do the best work possible. Before I give the floor to my colleague, allow me to remind you that already today, we all have high-quality service, and that's what Canadians are telling us. Canadians are telling us we are very satisfied. And that is 90% of Canadians who are saying that. They're saying we're very attached to Canada Post, but we don't all receive mail in the same way. I'll give you the data. 27% of them receive them door-to-door. 26% of Canadians receive them in a central area, for example, in high-rises. 32% of them receive it in community mailboxes. 11% of Canadians receive it through the post office. And finally, 4% of them receive them with remote mailboxes. So Canadians are telling us that they are very happy. And we see as that one size does not fit all. You can be satisfied even if you're not receiving in the same way as others. And now I will give the floor to my friend to talk about the issue of the different reality. Thank you.
I've been very fortunate in my career to spend a lot of it in rural Saskatchewan. I have lived in Moose Jaw and Regina, but I've lived in places like Lumsden and Sturgis and Ceylon. So I've experienced a great variety of mail service and always have been happy with the service. I understand the comments made about rural areas. I pick up my mail in a franchise. It's part of a store, and it's the only place that people really congregate and are there. We understand that, but it seems that people, wherever they receive their mail, however they receive it, are generally happy. The ones we heard that weren't happy were the ones that didn't receive, had the conversion. But they became much more happy with the service once they had incorporated the change. So I think there's a variety of ways. The hub idea, I think, is very important. As we see the depopulation of rural Canada, particularly in my area, rural Saskatchewan, fewer businesses and schools and so on, there just aren't as many people. And of course, mail service there's less mail to deliver. So how do you keep those places viable? How do you make them or maintain the community aspect? I think through that hub idea that offers other services to Canadians, particularly internet, can be very important to people in those situations. And if banking can be a partial solution to that, making it part of the hub along with other government services and so on, I think it can be very positive. But the one thing that we consistently heard was that there are many ways to receive the mail, to send mail, and people are generally happy. One size doesn't fit all, I guess, would be the catchphrase for Canada Post. One size does not fit all. And what works in Montreal or doesn't work in Montreal is certainly very different than what works in Silton, Saskatchewan.
7 minutes, please.
As for, oops. Oh, fini?
Convener, but
Okay.
we
I
will have
wanted
lots
to-
of time, and hopefully you can incorporate
come
the
back to
answers from one
governance.
questioner to another. Mr. Weir?
As I am to just speak in favor of your motion supporting the Rough Riders, I'm actually going to turn this round over to my colleague, Madame Trudel.
Merci. Alors, bonjour.
Good evening. Unlike my colleague, I am really disappointed with your report. It describes viable option, and I understand that you had a financial perspective, but I hope that you would have proposed more solutions. You spoke a lot in the introduction about the situation at Canada Post, but I get the impression that it's the same report that will be issued to the minister, that it is already set in stone and it's a foregone conclusion. A number of conclusions were drawn and not possible solutions. Then in your report, you mentioned a number of experts and researchers as well, and there were a number of numbers that were mentioned as well. On page 95, for example, there's no explanation of where these numbers were drawn from, who were the experts, who conducted the studies. I would like to have the information that you gathered about the polls and the letters. You said earlier that you received a number of memoranda, and I would like to know whether the committee could have this made available to them, this information made available to them, so that MPs can consult these documents and be made aware of them to enlighten the tour that we will be conducting and our own report. And I would like to jump to a question now. I would like to hear you talk about the financial situation at Canada Post. But in 2011, when you made the financial analysis, you mentioned the lockout. I would like to know why you didn't mention the lockout in 2011, which meant that 2011 was a difficult year for Canada Post. And then, secondly, we spoke a lot about banking services. That's something that Canada Post also conducted a study on. And I already asked in committee that study be made public. And it was, but it was redacted. And I think it would be relevant for us to have this document available to the committee. There is interesting information in the report. If the banks made $135 billion in profits, there is certainly a market that is available for Canada Post. You also mentioned a number of solutions that require investment for some infrastructure solutions. I would like to know why you rejected the proposal of postal banking, and whether you have the unredacted document that on postal banking that Canada Post published. I would like to give the floor to my colleagues, but allow me to say that I understand your disappointment. We also would have liked, well, it's ironic to say it, but we really hoped to find a secret solution. There's no easy solution. We think that there may be a variety of options. We presented options in our report. You are going to conduct consultations. You are the ones who will choose what seems the most promising solution. And we wanted to fulfill our mandate, and we wanted to determine whether it was something that could be easily fixed, or does it require further work. And given the advent of the digital age, I understand, but I would like you to answer the two questions that I mentioned. With respect to your question for the 2011 lockout, what we looked at earlier were the last 5 years and the average, on average, Canada Post did not have profits. There were profits, small profits in 2014, 2015, but if there is a growth of the, there was an increase in the cost of the stamp from 63 to 85, and if we continue to, increase the price of the stamp, you may lose market. On the issue of the option of postal banking, I think that it is extremely important that we present what would need to be invested for your consideration in order to create a sustainable bank. And with respect to the mandate that we were given, there is no easy way to establish this, and that is why we mentioned the postal banking counter. And with respect to any documents you would need, our documents were sent to the minister and to the department, and I think that they are the ones to whom you could address yourself. We are not authorized to make documents public. That is not our responsibility.
Won't cut into your time. Any draft reports remain confidential. Once reports, of course, are tabled in the House of Commons, they're certainly available to us and the general public as well. Now, there's about a minute and a half left, I believe. Yes?
Peut-être
Ms.
pour ajouter,
McLaughlin?
Madame, aussi que
I should perhaps add that when we conducted our citizen engagement, 89.1% of Canadians have a bank account or an account with a credit union. And when we conducted a check of Canadians and businesses, only 7% of Canadians said they would use postal banking, and 11% of industry said that. And 99.1% of Canadians are already have in a bank. The market is perhaps very limited. And given, as Madame Bertrand said, with respect to legislative changes and international trade and all of the regulations attached to banking, and in addition, it's almost in conflict with credit unions because those people are in rural regions and remote regions. All that means that when we came to the end of our study, for us it was not a viable solution from our perspective. Now, your perspective is another story. But with respect to money laundering, well, there are a lot of issues that would need to be invested in. And experts told us that it is a company that has a very significant risk today, and it could imperil the public interest.
Alors, merci à vous tous d'être ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Unlike my colleague, I congratulate you for the work you've done. It's an immense amount of work. The task forces group covers a number of issues, but I think that the safety of Canadians and users of Canada Post was not mentioned in the report. Canadians' safety. In my riding, a number of constituents have shared with me safety issues tied to community boxes. My question is the following. If we base ourselves on the premise that if Canada Post is a service for 17,700 boxes, what safety assessment is done on the location of these community boxes? Thank you for your question. It's true that we did not deal with the issue of safety in any great detail, especially in the focus groups that we held prior to the poll that we conducted. We heard that very often the surroundings of the community post boxes were problematic and caused concerns. When we ask Canadians and businesses about this, they said the first thing that people recognized was reliability. So when we conducted a poll, a scientific poll, it was not an issue that was perceived as being a problem. There might be some fear, but what we saw, and I think that was what Jim referred to earlier, if we don't explain how it will be done, and if we don't give information on the rationale, that people are afraid. But once people have become accustomed to community mailboxes, there are Canadians who went from home delivery to community mailboxes, and they are quite satisfied for the most part. I'll move on to my other question, but I can say that in my riding, I have done the work and I met with people from Canada Post, and I saw through their answers that we're starting to see that there's a danger. For example, the roads are dangerous. Just a small street, for example, and I was speaking to a few people in my riding. There are very high speeds, and even we were able to change 2 boxes. Yes, and the cities told us, we met with associations, and they told us that they were not sufficiently consulted the way they would have liked, and they want to be consulted, and together with Canada Post, they could determine the best places for community mailboxes, because there are some places that would be safer than others, whether it's in terms of traffic or theft. Thank you. My next question is the financial sustainability of Canada Post. It's obviously important to all of us. Nevertheless, the safety of the service offered, shouldn't it be a priority as well? What can you tell us about the measures to take to ensure the safety of users despite potential changes that Canada Post may undergo in the future? Well, with respect to safety, do you mean daily delivery or community mailboxes? Both. For us, I think what we observed in our polling was that Canadians are very satisfied with Canadian Post. There was no doubt about the ability of Canada Post to deliver the best possible service. And as I said, the reliability and everything that is signature related, Canada Post really delivers quality on this factor. The second thing I would say is that Canadians have told us that they are using the mail less and less, and that they are even overserved. So in the issue of the polling that we conducted and in the focus groups that we conducted, other than the fact that they were not informed sufficiently in advance and there was not the opportunity to have a better way to see how things were going, Canada Post is the face of the federal government in our communities. It is important that this service be associated with a high level of confidence. Above and beyond the initial assessment, what can you tell us about the response mechanism and its structure when a problematic situation is brought to the attention of Canada Post? I think that people told us quite in a significant way that they would prefer more consultation and more communication. People weren't questioning the means or the approaches, but rather the way in which it was rolled out. And you'll see in the options that we presented, we really highlighted the importance of collaboration among the various stakeholders. It must be done with a knowledge of the issues, and there must be sharing of information, because it's only together that we'll be able to find the best solutions. So that's what we've been promoting when we talked about the realignment or transformation of Canada Post. It can't be just done on a piece of paper. Since you're undertaking a vast consultation, that is already a good step in the right direction.
Our first intervener, Mr. McCauley.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank
everyone except for Mr. Hobson, whose Rough Riders beat the Eskimos in overtime Sunday, but thank you, and thank you for the team you brought with you. Yes. Did you look at the previous 5-point plan that the conference board had helped develop for Canada Post? I wonder if you could just share your views on that. Is that a viable thing to go back to, considering everything that you've studied?
Well, thank you for the question. We had prepared that one. No, but it was in our mandate to...
The top one is the obvious, the conversion, but what about the other items?
It was, asked for us to review, c'est-à-dire to look at past reviews and look what had happened. So definitely the 5-point plan is a constructive approach to a situation where we say in 2016, it's not sufficient. It's interesting, but we have to adapt to where we are today. And maybe I'll let my colleague Chris give you some more details on that one.
Madame, we've short on time, so I just have one more question. So if you could be brief, sorry. No, please go ahead. If you could just be brief, though.
Well, just to reiterate what Francois said, we did look at that. It was a workable plan at the time. Times have changed. They changed very, very quickly. Due to an increased need of consultation, particularly on the community mailboxes, the numbers changed somewhat, but directionally they were correct. So our paper basically took those facts and took them forward from a financial perspective.
Perfect, thank you. No, it sounds like the 5-point plan was generally a good step toward sustainability. Not that I'm advocating for it, but one of the items suggested to cover off the pension deficit was selling off assets such as Purolator. Did you look at that at all, or was that just something not considered?
The pension plan?
No, to cover off the deficit.
Oh, yeah.
Did you look at sale of assets such as Purolator or other?
Chris will answer that one if you wish.
Okay.
Yes, we obviously spent a fair amount of time on the pension and the solvency deficit, right. And we did look at the fixed assets and Purolator, and basically drew no conclusion except for the fact that that is optional to be reviewed. Certainly, our recommendation is to look at further synergies with regards to Purolator, but there are any number of fixed assets that may be redundant and could be monetized to solve or help solve the deficit.
Right. Oh, perfect. The long-term financials, I looked at Canada Post's revenue projection in 2026, saying they expect, despite everything we know, a 10%, I think you've even commented on an optimistic 10% increase in revenues. I don't see that happening. Have you discussed or studied what you think are their real revenue projections for 2026 for the committee? I should just put everything to Ms. Hogue. 3 of you are excused.
Yeah, indeed. But I have a little black, too. We certainly did. EY did a very robust scrub of the numbers that Canada Post gave us, and it was under a status quo scenario. And they thought the numbers within the projection period were reasonable and materially correct and directionally correct. However, any projection, as we know, particularly one going out to 10 years, is going to be by its nature inaccurate.
Right. The E&Y numbers, of course, show, as you mentioned, status quo, like no change in the community mailboxes. Did they do up another pro forma based on the community, based on some of your suggestions, the community mailboxes, the synergies, et cetera,
No, not within the outlook period, but clearly we had a look with EY as to could you take sensible steps, including looking at some of the options that we are putting forward, and basically decided that they're probably insufficient on their face, and a much more aggressive transformation would be required in order to render Canada Post self-sustainable in a financial perspective.
much. Monsieur Ayoub, 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Mr. Ayoub, 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel members for all of the work that you've done. All of the energy that you invested to shed light on this issue, and I'm very happy to be part of a committee that will travel across Canada to get to the heart of the matter with Canadians. I would like to say, as an aside, that I myself had to transition to a community mailbox over 2 years ago. You weren't appointed to the task force because things were going well. You were appointed because we wanted to shed light on the issues, and particularly because there was a crisis of confidence at Canada Post. And the crisis of confidence results from the fact that, well, the experience that I had with it 24 to 48 hours notice, we were told that community mailboxes were on the way. I would like to get back to planning, because internet, email, e-transfers are not something that have cropped up overnight. They have been around for years now, and the 5-point action plan was developed a number of years ago now. How is it that this plan was not implemented prior to now? And you talked about an action plan earlier, and I'm a bit concerned to know whether the action plan wasn't aggressive enough. And was it insufficient for 2016? It's an action plan that was quite recent. It should have been adopted, and there was a procedural hold put on it. So I think that it's important to remember, it's true what you said. Internet wasn't invented yesterday, but as with all technologies, and there are early adopters, and then there is a tipping point, and people change their behavior, and then there are resistors, and that's the same. It's the same thing in this case, and it has reached exponential growth, and we are encouraged to use the internet now. We saw it. Companies are asking us and telling us that they're going to force us to pay for paper bills, and so there's a change in behavior, and I think that that's what's happening. Increasingly, it's accelerating, and it's no longer sufficient to make adjustments a year at a time. Changes need to be made. We know that the cities and downtowns cannot accommodate community mailboxes, and the other thing that we know is that in the changes, people always resist change, and in order for change to be successful, there must be a great deal of communication and information sharing, and that's what was missing, the communication and information sharing. It seems that it was a plan that had already been decided upon prior, and it was forced on people, and it was insufficient at the end of the day to achieve objectives, because the objective is for Canada Post to remain autonomous and for it to remain a high-quality service. We don't have an opinion on the how, but Canadians told us in the focus groups, and also, for example, everyone should know that the financial situation is not easy and it's not rosy. So when we shared that with people, that's when we explained the options that were being considered, and in focus groups, people said what they would want, and stakeholders, when we met with them, told us that we would have liked to have been consulted further, and the municipalities were the most vocal in that respect. So the municipalities were the #1 stakeholder, and they were the first people affected by the cuts. It's not people were saying to their municipal councillors and to their mayors that my mailbox is closed, and they were on the front lines.
You can continue on. We'll go to Mr. Blaney for 5.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, j'ai manqué.
Thank you very much. I missed my new NDP colleagues' questions. But I'd just like to say that it's an excellent work that was done, and it is essential for any society to adjust to reality, to adjust its financial and technical resources. And it's the mandate, I believe, that was given to our committee, but also to your task force. I would like to come back to an issue.
Reality, the brutal reality, and of course, you've mentioned the pension, the deficit de solvabilité, the pension deficit. Do you think you will reach your objective to come up to the government with a viable solution, and more specifically, that is financially self-sustaining?
As I've said,
Comprenez-vous, Madame Tandon? Est-ce que vous croyez qu'il vous êtes en...
Do you understand? Do you think that we found the recipe?
To the caramel. That's why we're bringing to your attention some options that can bring savings and a bit of revenues that could kind of do the bridging that is necessary before going into a more in-depth realignment of the institution. Because I think it's important to all remember that Canadians don't want layoffs. They want the institution to remain a public service. They're satisfied, and they feel it's an important institution in Canada. So it is really a changing of the organization that has to be planned, in a sense, from what we've all gathered as information. It cannot be done overnight. There isn't one bullet that will do the job. So it's many actions that have to be taken, some being short-term and others with a long-term view.
Maybe I was not necessarily, I didn't mention this to cut jobs, but there are attrition, there are mechanisms. Are you willing to explore those avenues?
Thank you for the question. My friend here was all prepared to answer about, because it's an important one.
No, and we did really look at that, because when we were saying that 70% of the labor costs are fixed costs, there's very little to maneuver in order, unless you do a real complete changes in the governance and the approach. But as far as the location, we're saying that the window is the perfect window open right now. It's an opportunity, actually, and for the union, and for the corporation, and for stakeholders to look at the whole situation. In 4 years from now, right, first, the population, the age is 49 years old and up. They constitute 64% of the workforce, plus another 4% that's over 60 years old. So when you look at the demographic of the group of workers, you have almost 70% that in the next 4 to 10 years will be leaving.
70% of the workforce will be leaving.
That's over 49 age from today, 2016. There's 16,200 and something that are eligible in 2020.
That's huge.
It's huge, but it's huge in the right approach, because really, if everybody wants to work together, there is no reason to have work lost. It's it may be reductions of position, it may be realignment, but actually it's a perfect opportunity to streamline and to protect really the jobs of the employees that will be there.
I'm not an expert in the work relation. Is there as Canada Post has the capability to reduce its workforce, or there has to go to some negotiation with workers and
well,
stuff?
you know, collective agreement. I mean, it's there's always some stipulation and some restriction that is, and Canada Post is one that have in their collective agreement a clause of no layoff.
What?
No layoff after 5 years of work. So there's need to be.
But what about replacement? like if someone is leaving, because you say 70% could
C'est
leave,
ça.
is there any obligation for the Canada Post to fill up some of those or all those positions?
In some ways, because you cannot move a worker outside of 40 kilometers of their work location.
It seems to me it's viable.
Unfortunately,
it's workable.
Oui.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
workable.
for the
Thank you.
answer.
And perhaps you can continue that stream of questioning at the next round. We'll go to Madame Shanahan, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the panel for really a very exhaustive report where I'm struck by the mandate that you had from the Minister that you were tasked with looking at how Canada Post Corporation can provide quality services to Canadians at a reasonable price, and I think that you looked at all of the possible options in a very quantitative and robust way, but therein lies the rub, because, of course, what is the mandate of Canada Post? It is actually a mandate to provide a universal service. So there are built-in constraints that no private business would have, and I'm sure that was striking you as you were going through that. When we look at the history in brief, the fact that Canada Post was started out as a service that was a department of the government that was fully paid for because it was recognized as being a service that all Canadians needed, and it was a nation-building service, right? To be able to contact every citizen and provide that facility of communication and trade, knowing that it was changed to a Crown Corporation in 1981, but even then kind of lopsided with the pension still being part of the public service. I mean, I can just imagine how awkward it was during that time to manage that, but we had huge letter volumes, so it masked the problem, right? But any real business it has to be nimble and able to react to changing business environment. And what we've had with email and so on is basically a Uberization of Canada Post. So my question to you, I really want to put that out there. Knowing that is really the current mandate of Canada Post, even if you were to apply all of the 7 cost-cutting measures, was that enough to save Canada Post?
No. That's why we've said there are options of short and midterm that can bring savings and some revenues. And there is, for our perspective, and the facts we've gathered show that mid and long term, there's a realignment that has to be prepared because it went from mail to parcels. So the universal service obligation cannot be exactly defined as it used to be. The rural moratorium cannot be defined as it used to be. The operations ought to be reconsidered altogether.
If we are to stay with that sort of the Crown Corporation idea that it has to be sustainable with your mandate that you had.
It's our mandate. Yours might be another way of looking at it.
There you have it, because that's really, it all comes down to the mandate, and I was struck, and thank you for doing that extensive polling, by the satisfaction that Canadians expressed, the value that they place in the reliability. That's what my colleague was talking about, the importance of security, knowing that you're going to get your mail, and how much they appreciate Canada Post. I would, and you alluded to it before, the in-depth realignment of the services and so on. I mean, do you see how much are Canadians prepared to pay? Because of course this comes at a cost. Do you think for Canada Post? Did you get that?
They're not ready to pay, and
They're
that
not
was
ready to
clear
pay.
in the polls. No, but when you come with price, when we looked at different alternatives, once we put the financial situation, half of Canadians knew about the financial situation, but then we brought everybody to the same level and we said, are you prepared to this or that? So it was quite strong in terms of we're not prepared to pay for it. The price sensitivity is important, and there is the sensitivity of paying for somebody else. Given that they're paying already higher price for stamp, they pay for their parcels as well. So already, and when we talked about subsidy, because we brought it into the alternatives, and some people don't realize always that subsidy means taxpayers' money. They were not favorable to that idea.
So there's that price sensitivity at the counter.
Thank you very much. We'll go to our last 3-minute intervention of the first round. We should have enough time for another complete round. And we'll go to Monsieur Weir, or Mr. Weir, please, 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. An issue that's come up and that I think your task force has been seized with is this solvency deficit in Canada Post's pension plan. But of course, that's based on some fairly extreme assumptions of winding up the pension and having to pay out all the benefit obligations at once. It seems to me that Canada Post, as part of the federal government, it's going to have employees in the future contributing to the pension plan. So I wonder if solvency valuation is an inappropriate metric and if it might make more sense to look at things on a going concern basis.
Well, Canada Post is a Crown corporation. Being a Crown corporation, it has the same obligations as any other Crown corporation, either via rail, CBC, all have the same kind of framework. So the solvency issue is the responsibility of all Crown corporation. What makes it so huge, I'd say, is the number. It's a huge institution. And we all know we live longer than we used to, so it really adds up. The second thing is, of course, the interest rate has really brought the solvency to the high level.
I understand that, and I understand, as you say, that current legislation would require Canada Post to meet that solvency test. However, we're talking about the future of Canada Post and possible changes to the legislative regime governance. So I guess what I'm asking is, from more of a policy perspective, does it really make sense to hold Canada Post to a solvency valuation, or might it be more appropriate to focus on the going concern basis?
My friend here can take you, but we've offered a few options to address the solvency issue, but it requires really change, like regulatory ones.
I believe your question is it an appropriate measure, the solvency test? And certainly one could argue the pros and the cons of that. One of the things that we were struck with is that as Canada Post Corporation, it actually also, besides being a Crown, it competes in the private sector. And the private sector looks very carefully to ensure that it's a level playing field that Canada Post plays on. And they certainly did tell us in our stakeholder engagements that they would take a very dim view if Canada Post was let off the hook with regards to solvency measures when that's the standard that all other corporations are held to.
We'll go now to our start of the new round for 7 minutes. And Madame Ratanzi, please.
Thank you all. You really come with a very, very strong business background, and I appreciate what the work that you have done. And just to note that we are going to be doing consultation. Your role, as you noted, was to not conduct any public consultations, but rather the engagement of stakeholders. As you engaged with stakeholders, you also used ECOS for your consultation. Is it possible to get raw data that you received from them? Is it fair to share it with us? Because we will be doing the same thing, but we need to ensure that we enhance our research with what you probably received in raw data. Is it possible?
Well, Madam Vice Chair, for us, it is to be shared first with the department and then for the department to decide on how to share. Certainly for us, what we had to make public through the department was the discussion paper.
Fair enough, Mr. Chair. If we could take that up. I don't want to spend my minutes on it, but we'll discuss.
We can make a
this
request,
here.
Madame Tanzi.
So under the Canada Post Charter, or it's mandated to provide postal service to Canadians. I'm trying to figure out, how do you see this mandate being fulfilled? Because you note from your report that 90+% is satisfied with Canada Post. Canada Post is a symbol that they have come to adore. So when you say in your statement that Canadians are over-serviced by Canada Post, could you explain what you meant by it?
Well, veux-tu répondre?
I can try, but I'm not sure. You're looking to see if 99% are satisfied with Canada
No,
Post?
you had, in your report, you were saying, people, Canadians, 90% of the Canadians are satisfied with Canada Post. But then your report also refers to, or your discussion paper, really it's a discussion paper so that we're using it, refers to Canadians being overserved by Canada Post. What does that mean?
Okay, overserved.
What we heard was, as you said, they're overwhelmingly satisfied with Canada Post, but they told us that they could see themselves being happy with less than 5-day-a-week delivery, that they could accept alternate day delivery as a viable option, especially when it was held up against price increases. Price sensitivity was really an issue, so they would prefer to look at things like every second day delivery, that sort of thing. And I think those are the kind of options that need to be put on the table and discussed with Canadians. And also, as we surveyed and found that most people were quite happy with community mailboxes. We heard a lot of talk about the need for door-to-door delivery, but when you look at the numbers, the reality is that most people in Canada are not getting door-to-door delivery. They're getting it through community mailboxes, through post offices, through apartment lobbies, and so on. And so, when you talk to people, the consensus is somewhat different than what initial impressions were starting out.
So if I get you right, overserved you meant was they were getting, they didn't mind some service cuts. Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
Except in one area I would add, and that was parcels. They really want parcels to be timely and reliable and cost-effective as well.
Well, 85 cents stamp versus a $5 coffee. I mean, let's see. Let's be realistic. If we want services, we pay for it. Now, I was a little taken aback by the Canada Corporation's press release after your task force report, that says that your report or your discussion paper validates their 5-point plan. So my question is, did you look at the 5-point plan? And does this statement that they have made, is it a truism or is it just a juxtaposition? Because we have to keep an open mind. We are here to discuss.
Absolutely. As discussed previously during this meeting, we had a look at the 5-point plan. It was a good plan at that point in time. It wasn't fully actioned, but certainly it's even at the root of many of our recommendations. So to say that it was validated is probably correct, but it simply wasn't enough, and it isn't enough today.
Fair enough. In the Mr. Hobson, it's your resume says that you teach leadership, you do team building, you manage change. And Canada Post, really, we've not discussed this, is in the business of logistics. Think about it. They have excellent logistics. Has anybody reviewed that option? Because you gave the 5 options or the 6 options you've given does not look at that venture. Could you give me some insight?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question in terms of logistics.
So when you look at Canada, logistics is the business of delivering, you're having a network of services. And in that network of services, there is so much potential. There is potential for innovation, etc. And in your managing change, did you look at, as a group, somebody can answer, how this expertise in logistics could be utilized in a different channel to make the corporation more profitable?
Well, we looked at the several options that were there, and we talked about things that could be done in terms of streamlining. I think what you're referring to, though, is they do have this tremendous network right across Canada. They have a large, motivated group of employees, 50,000 plus. But we talk about that as we go forward, that's where the transformation comes in. And in order for transformation to occur, it needs all people working together and with this common vision, common goals, common values. So I think that is something that really needs to be part of this as we go forward, that it can't be business as usual as what we've seen in the past and continue to do things in the same way on the same time frames and so on. So we are talking about a buy-in by a large number of stakeholders, the Canada Post Corporation, government, the employees themselves, and the users, that really have to be on one page as we go forward to make this thing sustainable.
Oh, I'm done. 7 minutes done.
7 minutes goes by
dear.
very quickly, doesn't it? Monsieur Blaney. 7 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, merci beaucoup.
Mr. Blaney, 7 minutes, please. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to once again thank you, and to say another component that I appreciated in your report was that I had conversations with representatives who talked about the possibility of having postal banking services, and I thought that you really looked at the situation, and it's obvious that in the light of your conclusions, it is not necessarily a desirable avenue or a sustainable one, and that is good to know. Now, perhaps could you comment briefly on what I like about your report is that you distinguish between letters, which we could be ready to receive just once a week, parcels, which we would want to receive every day. It's as if the notion that the window of opportunity that represented by parcels could be closing, because it's almost like a catch-22. And I also thank you because you really clarified the one-size-fits-all. Canada Post is a varied delivery service. People are satisfied, and I understood that. Could you explain to me how we will get out of this situation where people are ready to receive letters less frequently and they want their parcels more often? And how do you reconcile that with this enormous deficit of $5 billion? Well, listen, we didn't get into how we would operationalize these solutions. We leave that to the experts, and that will be up to Canada Post itself. For us, the issue is that currently the two products are being delivered to the same system. Madame Mertansi was right when she referred to logistics. They have a lot of big data, but at the end of the day, there are other stakeholders in the environment as well who have that. So there are a lot of competitors. Anything that can affect their current assets, except for their last mile, they have a monopoly on that. Everything else is competitive with Uber, Amazon, and other actors. So we need to benefit from the opportunity represented by attrition and become more agile, and then achieve a solution for the solvability issue and make change. Will you recommend? We are not recommending anything. No? Well, in your report at the end, well, would you consider mail distribution separate from parcel distribution? Is that a possibility? Listen, I think it is an option that should be considered absolutely in the near future. If the government decides, yes, it could be one of the options. And that is why we discussed a change of governance and the opportunity and an opportunity to change the regulations, because we know in other sectors, not just in Canada, but in Canada, the regulations, when they are done intelligently and with a light hand, the main principles are a good space for all of the stakeholders to share their perspectives and their expertise, and for independent, impartial parties to be able to enact the government's policies. As an MP, I have municipalities and rural areas. If I'm able to demonstrate that it will be less expensive for people in rural communities to have improved services, for example, perhaps because the postal service will be in a convenience store which is open longer, that would reduce production costs and service delivery costs and improve its services. That is something that I would be ready as a politician to explain to my 30 municipalities, and to say, yes, we may be losing that cute little building with the Canadian flag, but you will get better service. And I think that we need to have this conversation. And I'll come back to the consultations. It might be interesting. You transmitted information, and I think that we need to raise the awareness of Canadians, and that in collaboration with Canada Post workers and the government, and I think that it is an essential component of your mandate, and that is why I think that in your recommendations, please don't hesitate to be bold. Well, at this stage, we have completed our work. We've given you the information so that you can conduct your consultations in an enlightened fashion, and currently, we are not making recommendations. We are presenting options at this stage. Yes, at this stage. Once again,
Ms. Hogg, who seem to like numbers, especially red numbers.
She loves numbers.
Yeah, loves. Well, it seems like Canada Post, the page 63 of the report is the most scary for me. I have the French version, but basically it says, if we don't make a change, we will hit a wall. You say it's the last paragraph of, well, it's option 6.5, the long-term viability of Canada Post. And although you are not making recommendation tonight, can you tell us where well, again, how you see we can solve this? And also, we say Canada Post is profitable, but we know the government has kind of give them a holiday on the pension, so it's not a real profit. It's just we're less in the hole than we thought we were. And how can it be shared with the Canadians so that they really understand what is the reality? Because they're the one who have to pay at the end.
And I'm very, very sorry to do this, but in the interest of time, perhaps you can hold your remarks and your answers to Mr. Bellini's intervention until the next go-around. Thank you very much, and we'll go now to Mr. Weir for 7 minutes, please.
Thanks very much. I'd just like to return briefly to this solvency valuation issue to say there's a big difference between considering that as a real thing that Canada Post needs to deal with and considering it as kind of a handicap that's applied to Canada Post to satisfy its private sector competitors. But moving on to another issue, I do want to return to the point about Canada Post having really imposed a loss on itself in 2011 by locking out its employees. The response that I heard from that was that, well, it's part of an average, but I see 2011 as having really dragged down that 5-year average that your task force considered. The other response you presented was that perhaps some of the profit in 2014 was kind of one-time revenue from increasing stamp prices. You note that point very clearly in your report. I'm just struck by the fact that your report doesn't mention the lockout at all in presenting the 2011 figure, and I just wonder if you might address that.
Well, because we went, what happened in 2011, it has moved on since then, and we looked at the 5 years. We say it's an average of no profit, and 14-15 is healthier, but it's healthier because of an increase that brought 200 million to the table. our consideration is we cannot go on increasing regularly the stamp price is what we...
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you could have looked at 4 years, you could have looked at 10 years. So I just think it's worth noting that there was a kind of exceptional reason for this loss in 2011 that does weigh pretty heavily on the average. I guess that's the point I'm looking for some acknowledgement of.
Chris?
Well, I won't dispute that it'll skew the 5-year average, but in reality, we looked at each one of those years individually, and the results were 3 of the years ran deficits, basically. Not till the exceptional price increase kicked in did that change. So although you are mathematically correct, we looked at each year basically on its own merits and did not dwell on that one-off.
Sure. Now, your task force is relatively pessimistic about the prospects for postal banking, but it seems to me really you've presented a critique of what we might call full postal banking, and you acknowledge that there might be potential for Canada Post to collaborate in quite effective ways with banks or with credit unions. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit on that. Do you consider that to be a positive option for the corporation?
Well, certainly we heard from the credit unions that service the more rural areas, and they were not looking for more competition, and especially from Canada Post.
No, I'm talking about the possibility of Canada Post having a partnership with credit unions in those remote areas.
That's part of the option.
That's part of the option, and what it is that we concluded was that banking today is really risk management, and it is not the forte of Canada Post. When we examined the hub concept, it was from a hosting perspective to meet a certain need, not only to maintain a postal presence, but to utilize that presence in the most effective way. One of the ways of doing that would be to host a conglomerate of banks should they wish to do that.
Sure. Now, in terms of the potential market for postal banking, I believe you've suggested it's quite limited because there's very few Canadians that currently don't have a bank account. I guess I look at the table on page 38 of your report, which suggests that if Canada Post were to open a full-service bank, 7% of Canadians would certainly use it, 22% would probably use it. So if half the probablys actually do use it, you're looking at maybe 20% of Canadians using the postal bank. Wouldn't that actually be a fairly big customer base that would actually be comparable to the big banks that are already established?
Well, our mandate was basically to look at financial self-sustainability, and the benefits would be greatly outweighed by the costs of doing that, and we just didn't see it as a viable solution.
Okay, and what's your sense of Canada Post's success, or perhaps lack of success, in selling financial services right now? I'm thinking about things like money orders. There already are some financial services available through post offices.
To the best of my knowledge, they do a decent job, but it's a very small portion of their profits, basically, and most Canadians look for those solutions elsewhere.
Okay.
It's not risk management as much. And for the seventh person, it's important to understand that this table, the percentage is for people who thought it was a good idea. We push to a subsequent question, would you use it? So it's not 7% of all Canadians per se.
Okay, still, I think a big chunk of the population.
In the focus group, and you'll see when you do the consultation, in the focus group, people kind of mentioned that it might be interesting, but they felt that it would have to be higher interest rate, kind of elements they felt that Canada Post, held by the government, would bring to them that would make it more interesting than what the banks or the credit unions or Desjardins would offer.
Sure.
And then it's more money. It's not as profitable.
Right. No, I take your point. Now, your task force seems very keen on the idea of more franchising. And I wonder if you might be able to just speak a little bit about some of the potential disadvantages or pitfalls of franchising.
Well, in the advantages, it's clear where, because of the rural moratorium that describes some localities and communities that are no longer rural, so we say probably it's time to redefine, because what we were told by Canadians, they like the idea of franchises because it has longer hours.
Sorry, just given limited time, what I was asking was for you to maybe identify some of the disadvantages. I think the report's very extensive on the advantages.
Intervened by saying that you will have one more 3-minute intervention. Perhaps you can bring the disadvantages up at that time. We'll move on now to Mr. Whalen for 7 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je veux remercier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank everyone for their hard work, and I would like to say that I'm a bit in agreement with Mr. Blaney about the financial rigor in this report, but also with Ms. Trudel, who said that she is a bit disappointed that there wasn't a greater mandate for the task force.
In terms of reference that was presented to you.
That's an interesting question. I guess we didn't find that we were, the 4 months, we would have liked to enjoy a bit the summer. We worked very hard to be able to produce a discussion paper of quality to your attention. But other than that, we were not we felt that we had everything we needed in order to be able to go poll Canadians, meet the stakeholders, subcontracted the expertise of EY and Oliver Wyman so that they can come to the table. And the 4 of us, as I've said in the preamble, have different experiences. We come from different provinces. We have all over 60, very young still, but lots of experience. So we felt that we were independent to do what ought to be done, given that what we were looking for is for an important institution to find ways to present to you so that it could be sustainable and not only financially sustainable.
Okay, so I mean, sustainable was the focus and the goal. I look at that perhaps as also the restraint, because when we look at the nature of Canada Post over, many, many decades, and not just back to '81, it provided a service to Canadians. It was part of a nation-building exercise. It brought the world to Canadians who live in all corners of the country. And the question now is that the world no longer comes to Canadians by route of the mail, but it comes to Canadians in many ways that it doesn't make it to all the corners of our country. Certainly in rural parts of my riding, access to internet is limited, access to banking is limited. When people move out of rural towns, it's because the services they need to engage in the modern world simply aren't there. But isn't that possibly part of Canada Post's role? And so when you say you weren't constrained, maybe I think that if you focus purely on the financial sustainability, maybe that was what constrained you. Simply because if you'd looked at what is the role of Canada Post in bringing the world to all corners of Canadians, they're ignoring the fact that that might actually, in today's day and age, cost some more money, and that maybe a subsidy for rural might be something that needs to be canvassed. What did you find from your survey of Canadians about their appetite for a subsidy for the service?
It wasn't the mandate at all. It was with no subsidy. It was self-sustainable. Okay. And it's interesting because at the same time, when we described the hub situation, what we had in mind is to bring to the community where it's really needed, kind of services beyond what is already Canada Post, but not necessarily through workers of Canada Post, but to offer the facilities of Canada Post, the post offices, where in the cities, it hasn't.
Thank you. With 7 minutes, I want to get on to the next point, so yes is fine. Within the service charter, were there any other aspects of the service charter beyond daily delivery and the closeness or the proximity of the service that you felt should be re-examined? Or is that really the primary of the two?
There was the length of how many days it has to reach the city and how many days it has to reach rural. And that many Canadians have told us that they could live with the longer time to reach the birthday card or,
Yes.
Except when you wait for a check, that one you won't.
Okay,
as soon
perfect.
As possible.
And the parcels
and then
you
you
mentioned
send
as
it
well.
internet.
And then when we talk about labor costs, are you including management side labor costs in those numbers as well?
Madame?
And just yes or no on that, because I want to follow up.
Okay.
No, we talk about the employee. the
Okay,
fixed
perfect.
cost.
Thank you. And so what are the management side labor costs of Canada Post? And just the number, please.
What are?
What's the management side labor cost at Canada Post? How many billion or how many hundreds of millions? I mean, it says,
It's there.
I had a difficult time finding it, which is why I'm asking
No,
the
it's
question.
there. We'll come back to your
Okay.
answer.
So in your discussion of reorganization and governance changes within Canada Post, how much synergies or how much do you think that the corporation might be able to save by reducing its 5% of employees who are management side? And this isn't supervised managers either. This is executive level managers. It's 5%. It seems quite high.
Well, we didn't look specifically at can it be reorganized, and for us that was not. We didn't compare with other organizations.
Okay, because
so
there's a
we
lot
cannot-
of work was done on reducing unionized labor side labor costs, and there's a lot of effort was put into that and many recommendations. Were the recommendations around reducing the cost of the management side?
Well,
labor costs?
from what we've studied already, action has been taken in reducing some of the numbers and also some of the benefits. For example, many have switched to contribution rather than benefit pension plan. So already some changes have occurred.
Maybe
Can more
headcount.
can occur? Probably.
Okay.
But
Because when we talk about reducing the size of the workforce in Canada Post, many millennials look to jobs at organizations like Canada Post or their retiring grandparents as a source of good long-term middle-class jobs. And by eliminating those from the workforce, it's certainly quite depressing for a new generation of people who are coming up and had looked to that as a possible source of employment for them. So I would just say that, when we look at this, do you think that maybe our committee with a broader mandate, not restrained by maybe some of the questions that you had focused on, what would you recommend that we could look at that you felt that you were unable to look at because our committee is not constrained by the mandate that you were presented with?
well,
If you could, please, if it's possible. If not, we'll move on and try and get an answer a little later.
Well, in the realignment, we think the attrition is a crossroad moment for Canada Post to make sure that the jobs that will be there will be for the long term. And probably those jobs we're considering that ought to still be there ought to be maybe with added value. Maybe it's jobs with much more the logistic that the Vice Chair was talking about earlier on. So it's not a matter of no more jobs. We went from 60,000, we're at 50,000. Maybe at one point we'll be with, a third less. But the value of those in terms of the task itself and what it will require more training and better value for like any organization. It has happened in banks, it has happened in government, it's happening everywhere.
Thank you so much. We'll go now to 5-minute rounds. Mr. McCauley, please.
Ms. Hogue, I don't know if you want to take the opportunity to answer Mr. Blaney's question briefly.
Briefly. Indeed, and I believe the question was basically the long-term financial self-sustainability. And certainly we have put forth a number of options for consideration, and they've got a sensible amount of cost-cutting and financial benefit to them and should be considered. But over the long haul, the real problem is that Canada Post has a dual mandate. It has its social policy, its universal obligation mandate, and it has its corporate mandate right now within the parcel area. And within that space, as we look at digitalization and what it is that is going to happen, while the monopoly side goes down and the competitive side goes up through parcels. Canada Post will be competing in the real world. And based on the projections that we looked at under a reasonable status quo perspective, the revenues simply will not outpace the costs. And ultimately, you end up with a financially unsustainable position, which is why we concluded that by 2026-ish, that we would be looking at sizable losses.
Excellent. Well explained. Just very quickly, I think you answered it when responding to Ms. Shanahan. Did I understand right? You asked, do I understand right, there is no appetite shown for higher taxes to support the current model? Was that correct? Or it wasn't just an appetite for higher stamp prices?
Well, the increase of stamps is not acceptable for, a little indexation is not noticeable. But when you go from 63 to 85, it is really where the problem lies. And if you forget about that and you talk about subsidy, it's important to, for people to understand that means your taxes, and people didn't want that either.
Perfect. Last real quick question. We talked a lot about community mailboxes, and almost looks practical-wise, we're going to go work down that path again. What do we have to do engagement-wise to get the municipalities back on board? Because we've seen everywhere from crazy mayors destroying.
Well, frankly, the more it will be planned with the communities involved, the better the situation will be. I think what we have observed and been told is that there was mostly no real
if we do
consultation.
proper consultation and planning, do you get a sense the municipalities will come on board?
Well, some will not when it touches the downtown. Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, they don't want it downtown, not because they're against it. It's not practical. They don't have the space. But, in the suburbs, it can be easily planned if there is
Luckily,
consultation.
downtown is mostly apartment buildings where...
Yeah, so that's why we took out from our calculation 800,000 doors that were touched by that option.
Right. Any time?
Madame Ratanzi, I believe you and Monsieur Durand are sharing a 5-minute intervention?
Yes, we are. And thank you. I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Whalen asked. And he asked you if the labor cost of operations, when labor costs, it says in the revenue area that the cost of operation is $6.2 billion. Part of that, you say, does not include executive salaries? If it doesn't, from an accounting perspective, how do you then come up with a profit or loss before tax? So I need to understand this.
Yes, it is included in the costs.
It is.
It is, and actually, if I could just elaborate, EY actually did a review of the management costs, which we were privileged to look at. And indeed, over the course of time, as the head count has gone down for the unionized staff, so has the management over the course of time, essentially. And they also, management applied for new hires direct contribution as opposed to benefit pension plans.
So
but
the
their benchmarking showed that their costs were in line directionally with like corporations.
And that's not my question here. My question is, we're talking about the sustainability of Canada Post, which is a national symbol, and I think we need to have a frank discussion about if you're losing labor force through attrition or whatever, or through change or streamlining of the process, what is this $2.3 billion in unallocated cost? Is it the cost of management salaries and contractual obligations?
It basically is the network costs that are common across all the lines of business that are not allocated. A small portion of that will be management costs.
And you don't know what percentage of it?
We did have a look at it. I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay,
but
because if I do the calculation
as
as an accountant and say 70% of $6.2 billion and then deduct the 64,000 or 61,000 people and then start looking at it, then I look at labor costs, it comes to be 3.5 billion, and then the rest is left as a guesstimate. So to get rid of the guesstimate and to ensure that we are logically looking at savings, we need to be balanced, and that's my major concern.
Okay, Madam Vice Chair, if you allow me, out of 4.4 billion labor costs, 650 million is management and overhead and back office.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
Madam
thank
Ratanzi
you.
asked for 2 minutes for you, and you have 2 minutes left, please.
Thank you. My question relates to AdMail and just the assumptions that the task force has made, and I'm assuming that you've come to these assumptions based on your conversations with Canada Post and just the decline of AdMail. Unless the government or Canada Post finds a way to provide every household a civic address, I don't see the decline in AdMail, going much down in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So it's just because it's the only way that Canadians or businesses rely and can send information to their potential customers. I'm just wondering how you came about those assumptions.
Okay. On this, there are two different, there's the address one and the neighborhood. Neighborhood, we know, no flyers, no nothing. It will go down because eventually the way people cost-benefit analysis for businesses will bring them to use more the digital, and also with the green trend that we're observing, it might accelerate that phenomenon. Remains the address thing. That is, for example, your credit card that comes home. It could be all kinds of things there, and the reliability is very important. But that, again, we see that in the digital world, more and more, there are solutions that are being brought that you can deliver the service without really going through the mail itself. You can do it digitally. So
But
we're not saying
that only answers for a segment of the market. I mean, again, the seniors, they're not all online, and that's,
Well,
we're not going to be communicating to those seniors in the future.
It's
and that's
interesting. The seniors are online much more than you seem to think, and that was our surprise.
But in rural Canada,
the
they don't have
Post.
access to internet.
It's the access and it's the broadband that is the problem. It's not that they don't want to be there. and they're
Unfortunately,
capable.
we'll have to leave it at that. Now, Mr. Mujah-Blaney or Ms. McCauley for 5
Merci
minutes.
beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. This is my last opportunity to ask a question, and I would like to thank you on behalf of the official opposition for your work. We are getting ready to go on consultation next week. Can you discuss with us a little bit the next steps that your committee plans to do, that we should do by the tabling of the report? The contractual agreements that we have stipulate our main responsibility was to come present our report to you. We are ready to come back after or during your consultation, so it finishes here. If you need us, we are available, but we do not have any further tasks other than what is requested of us. Oh, I thought that you were going to take our report, but no, we take your report, and then we make our recommendations, because that's why I was telling you to be bold with your recommendations, but finally I'm the one who needs to come up with bold recommendations. That was our work, and we understand the heavy responsibility that you are faced with, and if you need us, we can provide explanations and anything that you need, given the importance of the study. Thank you very much. So the committee has an important role because you are explaining options but not recommendations. So it is up to the committee to make recommendations. And so that's why we would have been very curious to see your recommendations, but that is not how the minister wanted to move forward. Very well.
My colleague, but just before, I just want to share with you that we've had the Canada Post and we've asked them about the 5-year plan, and this is this plan was stopped when the new government came in, and their estimation is that the fact that they've stopped the 5-year plan is a $500 million cost for taxpayer. So certainly there's a cost to do nothing or not to, comme on dit, take the bull by the horn. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So with that, I will, do you have some comment? I will share my time with
Just real quick,
Kelly.
okay, just getting back to Purelator, we know it's going to be growing and growing and growing, a larger percentage of the profit, sales, et cetera, of Canada Post. I think it's almost doubling in the projections by 2026. Did you get an impression when dealing with Canada Post that they're ready for this, knowing what we're seeing with various disruptors in the business force? We're seeing stuff like auto-drive cars. We could have Amazon. They're playing with drones. Did you get a sense Canada Post or Purelator folks are preparing for any of this?
Well,
are we going to be in 5 years from now with another?
They're taking action every day, but they're in an institution that has a tradition and that has a weight in itself, and to change and bring about change unless there is all stakeholders around a table that decide on the direction.
Unfortunately, I think you answered my question. Great. That's all I have. Again, thank you very much. It's been very enjoyable. Mr. Hobson, next time, Eskimos.
You can share. Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Majou Ayoub for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I always think it's interesting to see that we are learning about the committee's mandate in committee, but that's another issue. Listen, in the report, I looked at the international component, and the comparison with another countries is a bit difficult because Ernst & Young was the one conducting the comparisons. Oh, sorry, Oliver, another organization. On the international scene, were there other experiences? Because the digital age is worldwide. I understand that the rural reality is different in Canada, but quickly, the realities are very different, and that's where we look at Denmark, for example, which got rid of service completely, and it is completely digital, but its population is in a very small landmass, and so it was able to make transformations here that we would not be able to do because Canada is so vast, with so few people spread out over such a large area, barring the close to the American border. So do you have more time to develop this type of solution at the international level? Listen, with respect to what was proposed, and I think we really explored the issue a lot, nothing really jumped out at us to say, yes, it would be interesting to pursue this. There was nothing that would be applicable in an identical way because each country is different. And for postal banking, for example, if it had been introduced at a time when we weren't in this current situation, if you were not a country with the best banking system in the world for 8 years running, it might be different. It was just a different situation. I have 3 other questions, at least. Essential services. We talk about universal essential services. For you personally, after having been immersed in this file for 4 months, what is your opinion on essential services? For us, there must be essential service. Even in 2020, 2025. Now it cannot be defined as it was in the past. We will require a new charter. We spoke very little about people with reduced mobility and seniors who often have reduced mobility. The elderly are not people with reduced mobility. We are like other Canadians. We're saying find a solution for door-to-door for people with limited mobility. And that was in the options that we tabled. I have a couple of minutes left. I heard you talk. You talked about the relationship with all stakeholders. In general, how did things go? Did you have collaboration from the get-go, or did you feel a certain reluctance on the information that you needed to have? On the contrary, people, no, really, people came and sometimes tabled a report, sometimes it was just a conversation, and they tabled a memorandum later, but it was very generous. Even at Canada Post, yes. And I didn't mention it at the beginning. I should have, Mr. Chair.
Collaboration, because the context and the institution is complex. Alors, c'était très important.
So it was very important. And the unions also met with us, the 4 unions. Yes, absolutely. And to wrap up, in your opinion, are Canadians ready for a change in service or a change in approach at Canada Post? Listen, human beings don't like change very much. But once the how, the why, and the when is explained with the necessary nuance, we are convinced that Canadians can adapt to these changes. Thank you.
We'll go to Mademoiselle Trudel. S'il vous plaît.
Alors, il y a beaucoup de choses qui se sont.
So a lot of things have been said around the table this evening. I thank you for your answers. To clarify a little bit more about your report, you considered that the labor cost is fixed when in general we see that economists say that they consider the workforce as variable. I would like more explanations on that and why you made that decision to consider it as being fixed when economists consider it variable. Variable in the sense as if it's, for example, the workforce is fixed, but if you're an employee, you don't have vacation or leave. Part-time mail carriers don't have these either. Well, because it's the reality. Like many institutions, Canada Post is labor-intensive, despite all the distinctions that can be made between types of leave and so on and so forth. The labor force is still roughly at 70%, and it's fixed. That's it. And when you spoke about a deficit earlier, we talked about a 5-year deficit, and you see the recent quarter, Canada Post made $45 million. Can you tell us why is that? Is it because it's paying too much tax? We see that it's a profit in reality and not a deficit. Listen, it's like the $90 million. We'll have to wait for the other quarters to see how things are really evolving. The fact remains that the basic equation means that the costs are very significant with respect to the business, which has become essentially parcels, and it's not sustainable. Even if this year there is a small profit at the end of the year, the 10-year projection remains negative, and there's still the issue of solvency. Will it be in 2017, 2018? What solution needs to be applied? Well, we propose some options. It's the government that needs to decide. When you look at the primary revenue of Canada Post, it's letter mail, and there has been a drop in the last 10 years of 33%, but the last 5 years the drop was 20%. If you look at the digital era and the rate at which it's decreasing, the drop is there, and that is the main income for Canada Post. Ad mail is very little. it uses a large part of employees, but it's not very profitable. But the parcel traffic is growing. Yes, but it's a competitive market.
Our official round of interventions. I will do this, and I do this, use this very sparingly. I will invoke the right of the chair to ask one follow-up question. It was suggested to me by Mr. Whalen, but I think it's a good one. If there is any organization in Canada that's done a superlative job of branding themselves as the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and Mr. Whalen, no, this has got a point to it. Mr. Whalen pointed out. Do you think there's any opportunities for Canada Post, which is one of the most iconic federal institutions we have in this country, to brand and to take advantage of that and see some financial opportunities?
There was discussion of that throughout the work of the task force, and I think that's one of the reasons that the advertising option was put forth, that, you know, they are an iconic brand. They have a large presence in Canada, their fleet and so on. So yes, but when we looked at the options, we had to look at how did it fit with the workforce, how did it fit with the mandate, how did it fit with their core business, and so I understand the question, and it was discussed, but you know, there, as we said repeatedly, there's no magic bullet to the problems, and there has to be some sustainable change rather than thinking that we can just add on to what they're already doing and generate the revenues or reduce the costs that needed to be done on both sides.
Thank you so much for that. Colleagues, this is the end of our 2-hour-plus meeting. And let me just say on behalf of the entire committee, and I'm sure on behalf of the Minister, Madame Bertrand, and all of you on the task force, thank you again for all of the work that you have done, not just for the government, but on the service of all Canadians. Canadians do have a real affinity for Canada Post. I mentioned it's one of the most iconic federal institutions we have, and it is. They feel an ownership and a sense of pride in Canada Post. What that future will be, we have yet to determine, but you have gone a long way to providing us some options. Hopefully over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be getting some new suggestions and ideas from Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And then there will be a report tabled in Parliament based on both your findings and our findings, and hopefully that will lead the government down a path to making sure that Canada Post in the future remains a viable entity. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.